Coming up in this video, Cricket Victoria's sports dietitian and nutritionist Helen Duong gives a keynote talk on what cricketers should eat and drink for optimal performance. Let's go.
My work at Cricket Victoria across all of our elite men's and women's programs from academy to international elite is to coach methods and abilities to harness the power and potential of food to not only maximise physical development, but also enhance performance on field and, just as importantly, plant the seeds of nutritional well-being that set strong roots of behaviour and promote longer-term positive relationships with food, body image, relationships that will outlast their professional cricketing careers. What I've discovered over the last 12 years as a clinical and sports dietitian and one who's had the privilege of specialising in cricket performance nutrition for the last 9 is that with all that sophistication, optimal performance nutrition behaviours that enhance the development and performance of any aspiring cricketer can be essentially bubbled down into 3 fundamental actions. That is, knowing how to maximise nutrient and meal timing, optimise meal composition, and knowing how to snack with intention. I encourage and recommend our players to take a holistic view of their training week. If they are performing on a Saturday or a Sunday, adequate optimal nutrition really should be happening as early as Monday. However, zooming in on the 48 to 24 hours before a game, I firstly encourage a fuel frequency that is consistent and rhythmic. So the key message here is eat every 3 to 4 hours. It's the equivalent of stoking a campfire. A fire will only stay lit and burn bright for as long as you consistently fuel that fire. A cricketer's metabolic fires should be fueled by a variety of nutritious carbohydrate foods such as whole grains, fruit, dairy, carbohydrate being the preferred fuel of choice of the brain and the performing muscles for game day. With my batters, I talk to them about the needs particularly of the brain. The human brain roughly accounts for 2% of your body weight, however uses 50% of the carbohydrates of the foods that you eat. The brain is the driver of technical and functional performance, so it is of benefit for all our players to be ensuring regular sources of nutritious carbohydrate foods going into the tank 48 to 24 hours prior. So for example, one of our players, they quite love their classic Wheat Bix milk topped with yogurt and berries. That is a fantastic breakfast. It's a good blend of carbohydrates that are slow in digestion and released steadily across the day from the Wheat Bix, but also a variety of nutritious sugars found in the milk, the yogurt, as well as fruit. For my nervous players who can't tolerate a sit-down meal, I help them, I educate them on understanding what 1 gram of carbohydrate per kilo in the 2 to 4 hours prior to a game looks like. So for example, an 80 kilo young bowler, they need 80 grams of carbohydrates in their breakfast prior to their match in the morning. And what that could look like is a real food option could be 2 to 4 Wheat Bix, cup of milk and a banana. That will have the same amount of fuel as a banana smoothie made out of a cup of milk, a tub of yogurt, a banana and 2 tablespoons of honey blitzed up. There are 2 breakfast options here. For my nervous players, if they can't tolerate real food, they go for the liquid option. So with that, foods to eat pre-game, the key message here is to start and stoke the fire with carbohydrate foods at frequent intervals in the days leading up, and ensuring on the morning of the game that there is a carbohydrate-rich option, such as the cereal with fruit or a smoothie, and that's enough to top up fuel stores to ensure that the brain and the muscles are primed and ready to perform. Foods to eat during a game. During the game, I encourage my players to think about fueling frequently and planning to consume carbohydrate-rich options every 2 to 3 hours. A common mistake is relying too heavily on having larger meals, such as a large breakfast, a large lunch, and then becoming so hungry in the afternoon that the dinner becomes driven by hunger and being quite large before going to bed. So a practical example of this could be, what does 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrate look like? It could simply be a banana. A banana has roughly 20 grams of carbohydrate in it. That could be a planned break when the wicket falls, or when there's a drinks break. In that bag, when we've got the drinks, there are a few options in there for our players to go for. Another option could be a few quick bites of a muesli bar. But if players don't feel like eating real food options as such, something as small and as compact and as simple as little jelly lolly snakes. One jelly lolly snake is about 10 grams of carbohydrate. So, 1 to 3 jelly snakes provides that 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrate in a quickly accessed and easily digested form of fuel. So the strategy is fueling frequently with small carbohydrate top-ups, and what that does is it in turn provides a steady amount of fuel to stoke that metabolic fire, as well as assist in controlling hunger levels so that it doesn't become so pronounced towards the back end of the day. Foods to eat post-game for optimal recovery. How aggressive the recovery meal has to be will depend on how quickly that player has to perform again. For example, if it's just a 50 over 1 day game, when there is a planned day of break the next day, the recovery has to be as aggressive as if it were day 1, day 2 of a test match, or if there's a really congested T20 Big Bash schedule that the player has to back up and perform, as well as withstand the load of travel and the stresses involved. So recovery post-meal needs to cover the 4 R's of performance nutrition recovery. That is, refuel the glycogen, the energy that's been spent in exercise, repair muscles with protein, rehydrate and replace the fluids that have been lost in sweat in in the match. And fourthly, that meal needs to contain elements that can help rejuvenate the immune system, and also help rejuvenate muscles and body systems to reduce soreness. So vegetables, fruits, natural sources of antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds called polyphenols are the components that we're looking for in a recovery meal. So, for example, a couple of months ago, one of our opening batsmen saw at the last session of day 2 of a test match, and they finished on 199 overnight. So that night, given his time on feet was a lot higher than other members of the squad, I remember getting on WhatsApp and texting this player going, okay, this is what we need to put into your recovery meal. It has to have at least 1.2 grams of carbohydrate per kilo. You got to have 25 to 35 grams of protein. And we've got to make sure that there are at least 2 cricket balls worth of vegetables on your plate. So what that ended up translating into is this particular player loves Vietnamese cuisine. And for him, his favourite meal is Mongolian beef. So he took himself off to the restaurant that night and ordered himself Mongolian beef stir fry with lots of extra veg, and ordered the large rice on the side. So I hope that illustrates, just by knowing these fundamental 4 elements of a recovery meal, it's a flexible framework to use regardless of the cuisine. He could have easily taken himself to an Indian restaurant and found a carbohydrate such as basmati rice or the flatbreads on offer. Could have paired that with beef, or chicken curry, or something that contains quality protein. but would have made sure to order extra veg on the side. Hydration wise, simply having a glass or two of water paired with natural food sources of sodium, salts that are occurring naturally in food, gets the brain thirsty while also helping the body absorb the fluid. That's a way to ensure optimal recovery. A word about alcohol. Of course, we know that alcohol in the hours post exercise is detrimental to, it gets in the way of refueling, it can get in the way of muscle tissue fibers regenerating, and it can prolong inflammation. So if there's a niggle or a tear or some sort of injury, the worst thing you can do is drink alcohol after a game. So there used to be this myth about coffee being a dehydrating fluid, but that's been debunked since. Couldn't quote the paper or anything, but just in the last couple of years, although caffeine in isolation can potentially be a diuretic, where it stimulates fluid loss from the body, the form that it comes in, that is in coffee, in tea, it's still food, and there's still a lot of fluid that's served up in that option. So for example, a latte, a flat white, a classic Australian drink. We love our flat whites over here. Yes, there's the shot of espresso or of coffee, but then there's all that milk being quite a hydrating fluid. It's packed full of natural electrolytes, sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium even, and the benefits of that being hydrating far outweigh the potential dehydrating effects of that shot of coffee. So in terms of advice, I don't discourage my players from drinking coffee or tea at all. There's also a bit of a coffee culture, and there's also routines and superstitions and whatnot in terms of preparation. I'd rather respect that than the small negligible risk of dehydration. When it comes to Red Bull though, its function is actually caffeine. It is a compact, easily accessible and easily consumed and tolerated form of caffeine. Caffeine being an ergogenic, a performance supplement that has some strong evidence on its ability to enhance concentration. Caffeine being quite easily passed through the blood-brain barrier and getting into the neuro pathways that really switch athletes on. Red Bull's function is caffeine, an enjoyable way to get it in, not as a hydration tool. And if you watch carefully on TV, you'll see batters sitting there waiting for their go and they're sipping on a can of Red Bull. Know that they're doing okay. They're not doing anything wrong by their sports dietitian, but they're drinking it for the caffeine. And it's, although yes, it's in liquid form, that's not there for hydration. It's there for sharpening up and as a performance enhancing supplement within anti-doping guidelines. When it comes to hydration, cricket is a summer sport played in hot conditions, and also the brain is 80 to 85% water. So by ensuring your hydration levels are optimal, you're essentially supporting and enhancing your concentration, you're preventing early fatigue, and therefore preventing you from the dizziness and feeling fuzzy. Dehydration can reduce performance, it reduces concentration. We know that as little as 1% body weight loss from sweat can affect line and length in bowling. There was a study that came out a couple of years. It was quite a novel study, by the way, just showing how the effect of dehydration specifically on cricket skill. I must also highlight that now more than ever in my 12-year career that I'm starting to see more and more the dark side of taking nutrition too seriously or being too rigid. I found the word diet has turned into a way of describing how not to eat. Don't eat sugar, don't eat carbs after 7, don't. When really, in my training and in my day-to-day coaching work, diet merely means a way of describing of how to eat and what to be eating. So diet needs to be reclaimed as a way of describing a way of eating, regardless of what that dietary approach is. Flexible, mixed diet, vegan, vegetarian, there will always be a way of achieving the best version of this. In that context, particularly with mental health, the discussion and the awareness, it's great to see it getting more airplay and being spoken about more openly. This is a huge step forwards. But to talk about mental health, you must also include that eating disorders and disordered eating is a type of mental health illness, and it is not a small female aesthetic sport illness. Eating disorders, disordered eating, poor body image happen across all walks of life. Anybody, any gender, any sport, any time. Statistics here in Australia, we know that if we look at the genders, 37% of people experiencing eating disorders identify as male, and it is because of the underdiagnosis and cultural stigma, and particularly athletic men. That actual proportion could be even greater. We just don't know that. And given what we know about eating disorders and between the ages of 13 and 18, boys and girls are just as likely to struggle with their relationship with food and body. And particularly speaking about men in the sporting context, and I'm talking about this generally, not just cricket, but also in soccer and football and many high-performing Olympic sports. The statistics are that 33% of males could be in sport. The prevalence of disordered eating is 66% in females, but also 33% in males. This means that 1 in 3 male athletes could be struggling with their eating and their body image. And to bubble that down, really, of our 28-man list in our cricket team, statistically up to 9 of them could be struggling with their eating and their body image at any time. So it isn't just the physical, when it comes to nutrition, it's just not physical, but it's also tied in quite tightly with mental health. And good nutrition really is an approach, and my role at Cricket Victoria is to coach my players through both the scientific knowledge and the practical application so that they can autonomously make flexible, dynamic food choices in their own homes, domestically when they're on tour, but also internationally, and be that coach on the side, supporting them to make independent choices that work for them.
If you got great value from that video, please do hit that like button for me and subscribe to the channel too. Be sure to also follow Helen on all her socials, link in the description below, and I'll see you in the next video.